Hello. This is an off-the-cuff opinion on the Stop Killing Games initiative. So, Josh Strife Hayes, who's a YouTuber, posted a link to a video that talks about this. There's a lot of drama in this, which I don't understand regarding pirate software. I think it says something bad about it. But if you don't know, Stop Killing Games is an initiative to make sure that publishers, developers are legally obligated to do certain things when the lifetime of their game ends. So, an example being a game is released, people play it 10 years later, after all the updates, the company, for whatever reason, maybe it can't financially support the game anymore, shuts the servers down, no one can play the game anymore. So the idea of this initiative is to make sure that legally the developer is obliged to do something about this. And I just want to go over my background. I've played games my whole life. I make games, but I am a developer. And I'm a small developer, an indie developer. And so, off the bat, I think regulation, especially EU regulation, is worrying when it comes to software because they haven't got it right in the past. And I understand the landscape of software and in particular how odd games are. So just to go over that, games are kind of a unicorn when it comes to software. There really is no other software in the modern world that you sell for a one-off price that you then can play forever or use forever. Almost all software is subscription based because due to the nature of software, it has to be updated all of the time, because it breaks, because underlying platforms change, hardware changes, and there is an expectation in outside of games that you pay monthly or whatever, you pay some recurring cost and you get continuous updates for the software and you get to use it forever until you stop paying. Games is a weird historical edge case for some reason. I don't know why, but the expectation is with a game you pay once and you essentially get updates forever. And I think this is a holdover from the console market where people want a console-like experience where you pay for the game and you just get to play it forever, but they want it on a modern platform, which is PC, with ever-changing software, ever-changing platforms that no one really, like a shifting sand underneath you, tons of different hardware, blah 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 blah. So back in the day, you bought a PlayStation game. When you bought that game, you knew you were buying it for PlayStation, and you played it on PlayStation. When you bought that game, you didn't expect to play it on PC. You didn't expect to be able to download the game on PC and play it there. You knew you had it for the lifetime of the PlayStation. Essentially, you had a license to that game. Nowadays, you buy a game on PC, it's a grey area of what are you purchasing there, because you want a console experience, you want support forever, but that is not feasible realistically because it's very hard to maintain that. It costs money. So my first point with Stop Killing Games. So if we go through the FAQ, I take issue with the way that they talk about. So the problem is, as a gamer, I know how scummy publishers can be, and there definitely are some shitty practices going on, 100%. But when a game support for a game ends, there has to be an end date. Like, you can't. It costs money to maintain software, so for any game there is a lifetime that it has, which is basically how long that company can support that game before it costs too much money, or that company might go out of business, and then I suppose the IP and the binaries are sold to whoever buys that company or buys that intellectual property. But everything has a lifetime. So when you buy a game on PC, and I'm using PC as a good example because that's often what people were talking about when they talk about these kinds of games. But it can apply to, especially now where increasingly games need to be connected to servers, it can apply to console games too. But you buy a game nowadays and you want updates, and there's an expectation you should get them. But whatever. This is beside the point. That's just an overview of the current market. It's weird. It's a weird grey area. I don't think anyone knows how to sell software very well. You can see this in games with AAA where they keep trying to do live. They keep trying to do it like other software, live services, and gamers hate that because it sucks. Because at the end of the day, you do just want to buy something and have it forever. Well, not have it forever. You just want to buy a product that has a finite size. It isn't an ever-expanding molasses that just goes on forever like some games are nowadays. But anyway, I wanted to address... So my criticisms of Stop Killing Games are really that... Well, I broadly agree with the whole initiative, which is a bit of a cop-out. I think there does need to be change, legal change, regulatory change. Just, I don't... My issue is making developers and publishers do things. Instead, I think the legal changes should be that consumers know instead what they're buying, that they know that they're buying something that's finite in lifetime. Personally, people are going to hate that, but personally I think that would change. I think that would just fix this problem. I think if you knew when you bought Destiny 2, Destiny 2 is a good example because I've never played it, but I know how it has worked over the last 10 years where there are certain parts of that game you cannot play anymore because they've been phased out of the updates. So you paid for content that you now can't play, which on the face of it is like, what the hell? But if that was expressly told to you when you bought Destiny and you were told that this game only has X amount of years and at the end we will do X, Y, Z, then I think a lot of this goes away. Because otherwise, my issue is when... So Stop Killing Games wants companies to have an end-of-life plan. They want to modify or patch the game so that it can run on custom systems. And I just think... I think the issue with this is there's just a lot of details here that... Obviously, they're not going to outline... It's an initiative. They're not going to outline exactly what should happen given certain situations. But it's very difficult to do this, I think. Especially because what does it mean to run on customer systems? Does that mean the systems that it was intended to run on? Does that mean on the hardware at the time of which it was released, or does that mean hardware now? These things take time and money to do, which a company might... If a company is about to go bust, it can't really do this. So what's the alternative? Is the alternative that they just give away the binaries? And that's another problem entirely. But I think realistically, I can't think of any other scenario other than that the only way you could really make this work is if they gave away the source code to the game, and that way people and members of the public can build the game and patch the game to make sure it works on current systems. I can't think of any other way that would work, and the problem with that is that's just not realistic at all, because you have all these licensing problems with that you couldn't open source. I mean, a lot of software you can't open source because you're using a library that the license doesn't permit you to do that. You've got all these other complications. It's also it's your business. I mean, it would come at substantial cost for you too, in terms of opportunity cost as a developer, to just give away your source code at the end of life of the game, and also knowing that you'd have to do that. And I know I'm sort of making a straw man of this because they haven't said that you should give away your source code, but I do think that in order to cover all the cases of which you would need to do this, ultimately you would have to give away your source code, I believe. Maybe I'm wrong. Someone can correct me if they can think of a case where that wouldn't happen. But I think it's tricky. It's tricky. I just think it's too icky. It's too complicated. So and this is my, I guess my, like, I think it's a really great initiative. I just think it overextends a bit too much, and that what I'm worried about is if the wider software world, which is like the Eye of Sauron, which I mentioned in a Twitter comment, if that catches on to what's going on here, because games are very unique, and I don't think developers want to do, and gamers don't want it either. They don't want software sold. They don't want games as a software or a service, broadly speaking, and no one really wants to do that. I think it's quite anti-competitive. I think it's bad for games, but I think if you overreach with this kind of regulation, you're going to kind of force companies to do that. They're just going to say, you know what, we're not going to sell a finite product. We're just going to sell you a service you pay a subscription for, because it gets them out of this legal hot water obligation. That would be my criticism specifically of this thing. I didn't explain it very well. So there was another point I wanted to talk about too. So I haven't really thought about multiplayer games. I mean, that is another question entirely, because if you have servers, well, I'm not even gonna touch on that one. But here we go. So there was another point in this video where he talked about licensing. So here we go. Aren't companies able to do this? So this is regarding giving up intellectual property. So no, we would not require the company to give up any of its intellectual property rights, only allow players to continue running the game they purchased. Well, your binary is intellectual property. If you gave away the binary executable, I mean, well, I suppose it's not, but again, go back to my other point, I do think you'd have to release the source code to fulfill this obligation about patching it and having it work in perpetuity. I know that explicitly they said that the developers, well, that's the only way you could have the game work forever, basically. Aren't the companies unable to do this due to license agreement they make with other companies that expire? Like, yes. So this is a big problem too. So the answer here is no. While these can be a problem for the industry, those would only prohibit the company from selling additional copies of the game once the license expires. They would not prevent existing buyers from continuing to use the game they've already paid for. I don't think this is true either, because I don't know exactly what kind of license agreements people these developers are making. So, but the problem is if you purchased a license to the game, which is often how it works when you buy a game, then that license does have an expiry, I would imagine. Maybe I'm just talking about my arse in this one. But anyway, so won't asking for this harm developers? It is very unlikely and is far more likely to benefit them. Many video games developers have voiced their dissatisfaction with having this game they spent years of their life working on destroyed by their publisher being powerless to stop it, but having laws requiring the game to function would help the work and legacy endure. So I think if developers want to give, the publishers want to do that, I think at the end of the day, this is the thing, at the end of the day, I am someone who makes something and I want to sell it. Well, I want people to play it ultimately, but you have to sell it because I need money to make it, and I need money to make something new, and I want people to buy the things I make, and I own those things, and I don't think you can't just, even if a publisher is scummy, they still own the IP, they still own the work. You can't make them give it away. And yes, it is really annoying when you have a game that is just completely locked away by a publisher because they've decided to, but ultimately they've decided to because they think they can make money on that in the future. They think they can, I don't know, remaster it, blah, 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 blah. And you can call that greedy all you want. And I'm happy to be, I guess, the bad guy here, but at the end of the day, they have to be able to make money. I mean, they have to be able to make money, and gamers are licensing these games for a temporary amount of time. I think, although that is a grey area, I think this is the issue here, is that expectations are not set appropriately. I think they should be legally obligated to explain that they are selling this game for 10 years. And here is the end of life plan, which could be that they do nothing. It could be that they release the source code. It could be that they release the binaries. People are going to hate me for this video probably, but I am skeptical of this kind of regulation. I think also there's, based on the conversations I was having on Twitter, there's most developers are indie developers, probably by population, are really small developers who are probably self-publish, or they're indies, so they probably self-publish, so that they would likely, and they're probably making single-player games anyway. So you've got regulation that, like, those guys are going to give their game away because they're doing it for the, well, they're not going to give the game away, but they're going to most likely be sympathetic towards gamers. And if they wasn't an end of life or their company went under, hopefully I think a lot of indie game developers would try to make sure that game could be played after they're gone. So this really only applies to big publishers, and to be honest, based on the fact that they're trying to move to live service, they're already in trouble. Honestly, I don't think you even need regulation. I think the market will just sort itself out on this one. I think a lot of these publishers are probably either going to change strategy, die off. Like, basically, I don't think you need to. Well, look, I could be wrong. I could be wrong about all this. But anyway, let me know. This is probably completely nonsensical. I'm not even going to listen back to this. I'm just going to post this and whatever. So basically, best case scenario, this works and everyone's happy, obviously. Worst case scenario, they bring in some laws. The whole game industry is like, shit, let's just do what other software industry is doing, and now everything's a live service game. I think that's what will probably happen with this. Because I think gamers, and this is, people are really gonna hate me for this, but gamers are getting such a good deal. You buy a game. I've got a game on Steam, and it's like £5, British pounds sterling. I am obligated, not legally necessarily, but expectation is that game should work for, well, forever. I mean, I am obligated to update that game to make sure it works. And I think, on one hand, I think fair enough, but on the other hand, that is a crazy obligation for the buy-in that you're doing. Like, especially if you're a smaller developer. I'm one guy, so luckily it's not a very complicated game, so I can update it, and things don't change that often, so I'm exaggerating maybe how bad it is, but gamers need to understand, like, you do have this expectation that is quite it is a lot, like, and it's hard for people to fulfill that, just to come at it from a developer's, publisher's point of view, because at the end of the day they do have to make money. So if they're selling their game for £5, and it's a bit of a, and that game goes out, like, they stop supporting after 10 years, well, how much money do they make from that? People are going to hate that. But anyway, just I don't, everyone involved in this, I agree with. I think everyone's got some good points. I do think the developer side is kind of lacking in this conversation. The Pirate Software thing, I don't know what he said, but he probably said it in an arseholey way, because he comes off as an arsehole. No offense to him, but he does. And if you want to get angry at me, just make sure that you go to my website and play the game that's on there, because it's all fun and games. I'm not trying to, at the end of the day, I'm just a random retard online, so don't worry about it. Alright, goodbye.